This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Thanks for tuning into our show today. I'm very excited about our conversation with Paige Dimakos from the Draft Network. And we're going to talk some football, and she's got a really cool story and a cool journey that God has taken her on. Before we get to that, I want to tell you about a couple places. First, our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the best place to go for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. Daily devotionals, articles, stories, podcasts, they're all there at our website. It's a great place to bookmark and go back every single day, sportspectrum.com. And then these stories that we tell, we rely on you guys to share them with us. A lot of these stories and a lot of different people that come to us about being on the show or about having us write a story or an article on the website, they come from listeners and readers and viewers like you guys. So my email address, if you'd like to send a story or suggest a guest to us, is jason@sportspectrum.com. Super simple, and it comes right to me, jason@sportspectrum.com. That is my email address. I'd love to hear from you, and you can reach me directly right there. We are also presented today and want to say thanks to our sponsors and partners, Compassion International. And right now, the initiative that they have going on with Fill the Stadium is such an important one. COVID-19 has left children around the world who are living in poverty just in a really dire situation. I mean, the issue of food has gone from hunger to starvation. The pandemic has magnified their needs, and they are truly in crisis right now. So we want to partner up with Compassion International for this Fill the Stadium initiative. They're actually partnering with pro athletes as well, because 70,000 kids have been left potentially without a sponsorship and are in desperate need of help because of the pandemic. Well, 70,000 is also the average size of many pro football stadiums that were once filled and now sit mostly empty. And each of the 70,000 empty seats represents a child in crisis who needs your help. He needs us to step up and fill the stadium. Now, for the cost of a couple tickets, food, and drinks to the games that few can attend, you can help one kid for an entire year. So check out the website, fillthestadium.com right now, and click Give Now. It's a great time to join with Compassion and help release kids from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. Today on Sports Spectrum, we welcome Paige Dimakos. She is the CEO of the Draft Network. She has a diverse media background that has seen stops at the Big Ten Network, ESPN in Phoenix, and CBS Sports. She's hosted 5 NFL draft shows and covered Final Fours, college football national championships, and 3 Super Bowls. She got her grad degree from the University of Nebraska. She's a Husker. And now she's also, besides being the CEO of the Draft Network, the host of the TDN Fantasy podcast, a show that she started in college and now has over 7 million downloads just last year in 2019. I'm a little jealous of that number, if I'm being honest with you, Paige. That's awesome. She's active on Twitter and Instagram, and the Draft Network is one of the fastest growing media sites in the country. And Paige has a really good story here. She's got a fun journey. She's got some great stories to tell about her story, and she was a lot of fun to have here on the show. Take a listen to Paige Dimakos joining us here on Sports Spectrum. She is the Chief Operating Officer of the Draft Network, has a diverse media background that has seen stops at the Big Ten Network, ESPN Phoenix, CBS Sports, and others. Paige Dimakos, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
Jason, you know how I know that you have it's just that turn of the time is because since you and Alexis, who does all my PR, spoke, I have taken over as the CEO. So new CEO. Title, breaking it on the podcast, which is super exciting. Chaos in this time of the year for the Draft Network. Okay. It's like the most chaotic timing possible is, hey, would you like to take over as CEO in the year 2020? Yeah, very interesting timing, but excited nonetheless. Draft Network, we're in the middle, obviously, of a very interesting football playoff season.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I feel very lucky and blessed to have gotten football at all. That's pretty much what I've landed on
Well,
for my
right.
blessings for 2020.
Right. The fact that there was even any football, the fact that you and I
Yes.
get to have jobs that work in sports is pretty awesome. But I think there's a lot of people, certainly the football fans know what the Draft Network is. But for some of our listeners that may not be aware, know exactly what the Draft Network is, explain about it for us, Paige.
Yeah, absolutely. So two sides to what we do at the Draft Network. One side, a traditional sports media company covering the NFL and college football in all the traditional senses digitally, right? So you're thinking every touch point of the digital experience, audio, social, video, writing component strictly on the digital side. The other side is our scouting department. So when you say the Draft Network, the association is obviously with the NFL draft. So what we are doing is we are covering the draft from this lens all year round. So if you're a Jets fan, you've been really excited about the 2021 draft since about September 15th, right? It was a quick turn to Adam Gase is not the guy. This is not going to be the team. Here we go, Trevor Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a very quick turnaround. So the other side is I have a group of scouts who most of them have experience working in NFL front offices under Bill Belichick, under Scott Pioli, which is amazing. And they're funneling into all these scouting reports. So we've had 450 scouting reports done since July, right? So all these college football players, they're watching the tape and grinding, and they're producing the best, most accurate scouting reports to funnel into our mock draft machine, which is a simulation of the draft. So if you're a Bears fan like I am, you're sitting down, you're going, man, I'm praying for a quarterback. Can we finally, in the first ever time in our franchise, get one? You're sitting in the mock draft machine. You're going, okay, I'm praying for Zach Wilson. I'm praying for this guy. I'm praying. And you can simulate the draft as many times as you want. And you can tell Ryan Pace you're better at the job than he is, if he has one still. So we'll see. To be determined on how this all shakes out. But yes, that's the best description I can give you on everything that's going on at TDN.
Clearly, if you're a football fan, you need to be in on the Draft Network. But I wonder because, we're both in this business. I hate what that word, but this media business that it is. So how did you guys figure out a way to cut through the noise? Because there's big hitters. Obviously, there's the ESPNs and others of the world. And yet you've been growing the Draft Network to a pretty large place where you have a great audience. What were some of the keys that you thought to cut through the noise to make sure or just to grow that audience, I guess, because there's so much noise out there and so many different people in this business?
For sure. I think when the company was first started, the owner, J.C. Cornell, and the original founding members saw an opportunity to bring the NFL draft front facing, right? So traditionally, you don't get to see what a front office is doing 365 days of the year. You don't get the scouting reports. You don't get the free agency talk. You don't get the salary cap breakdowns. You don't get any of that. That's what a front office is doing. So the original concept was bringing what a front office does behind the scenes, front facing, to a very, very, very dedicated fan base, the NFL fan that is so interested and wants more. And the NFL draft is just becoming this bigger experience year after year after year. And 2 years ago, our last virtual one that was in Nashville was an epic experience of biggest proportions. And we knew that Vegas was supposed to be in the year 2020. That'll happen in 2021. It'll be an awesome experience for NFL fans. And it's almost similar tendencies to what you've seen happen in the NBA in years prior, where you looked and you said, okay, people are actively talking about tanking for insert this player, right? And that happened in the NBA much sooner than it did in the NFL. And while I don't agree that any team can tank, I do agree that front offices can tank, right? And they can start moving players and they can start making moves and they can bare bone their roster down to try and set themselves up for a better draft position, in which in the NBA, it's not a sure thing. In the NFL, it is a sure thing. If you lose, you go 0-16, you're going to more than likely 99.9% of the time, you're going to have number one overall draft pick, right? Yep. The Jets are going to have Trevor Lawrence. They're going to get him. They're going to be stuck in that position. And so that's where, they've been able to funnel that down and get excited about that experience earlier. Tank for Tua. Trevor Lawrence, people have been excited about that kid since he was in high school, right? I mean, it's starting earlier and earlier. So just bringing that process front facing. And then mostly I'd say since I've been involved with TDN and as I've grown in and as I've looked at the very crowded space, because it's a very crowded space, it's staying in our lane, right? We know what we do really well. And instead of trying to try and do what everybody else is doing, we're focused on competing with ourselves day in and day out, getting better at what we do, serving our audience, and not losing touch with the community that we've built.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of companies start to get too big for their britches and they forget who their core audience is. And so they're trying to do a bunch of different stuff. And instead of doing that, we're just so say, this is our lane. This is where we're going to stay. We're going to continue to focus on our core audience and we're going to do what we do best. And I think that's what's really worked out for us at the Draft Network.
Yeah, the website's thedraftnetwork.com. People need to go check it out. But that's what we try to do as well with Sports Spectrum. You know, our lane is sports and faith. Yep. And if we start deviating from that, our core audience is going to listen and be like, what are they doing? Why are they going there or there? We just try to stay right in the middle of our lane and not go anywhere that, you know, would otherwise just confuse people, I guess.
Be off brand, right?
Yes,
be off brand.
exactly.
I think people get so infatuated with the branding word, right? And they're infatuated with it, but then they forget what their brand is, right? And I ask that question to every company or executive or person that I talk to, because I'm always intrigued. What do you think your brand is? But then that's nice that you think that's your brand. What does your audience think your brand is? Right? Because if those things don't align, you're going to have big issues. And I think that's where that starts to is you've got two intersects that you're meeting at the midway point. If you start deviating and you go too left or too right or too much in a direction that doesn't exist, your core audience is going to be left going, wait, I wasn't expecting that. And they're probably not going to like it very much.
Paige Dimakos is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So let's learn about Paige Dimakos. Take us back to that little kid. Tell us about childhood, the role sports played, the role faith played, and kind of a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I think it was fun to sit down and really think about my faith journey when you initially had asked me to kind of just set the scene. And I went to a small private school, a Lutheran school in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a suburb outside of Chicago, St. Peter Lutheran. And it was in a very tumultuous time, right? Like my childhood was pretty good for a little while. And then my parents got divorced and it was very messy and there was changing and there was mom leaving and a lot of very scary moments for a kid. And the only thing that stayed the same, right? There's kids, I think kids a lot, but people in general need structure, right? They need things they can count on. And what I could count on from kindergarten to 8th grade was my community at St. Peter Lutheran, whether that was church choir or my small group of friends or my principal, Mr. Kirsch, who was amazing, my Mr. Flett, who was our unbelievable gym teacher, who everybody loved so much. Like every teacher, like Mrs. J, my 3rd grade teacher who led our choir, like everybody, she's the most joyful, wonderful human being. Like there was just so many people and influences that helped me stay grounded and afloat during a time that otherwise would have probably have been very bad, right? There would have been times where I think a lot of kids start to veer off and get into things that they're not supposed to, or get into trouble or lash out. And that period of time never happened for me because I had such a grounded approach and the church and my school and my friends. And that kept me sane, really is the word to use. It kept me sane. And it was so crucial for such a big part of my growing up life. I mean, kindergarten, 8th grade, that's a long time to be at one school. And that was my, the same kids, knew the same kids through kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. And we're all in a Snapchat group now, which I think is so funny. Right.
That is funny.
It is funny.
Well, is there a moment as you got older, because there's a lot of people that I know who grew up, whether it was in faith through the school, whether their parents, kind of took them to church or whatever. But then when we get older and we get out of high school and we go on to this real world thing that we all have to do, we have to make decisions for ourselves. So was there a moment somewhere for you in your teen years, maybe in your 20s, when you started to take on this faith and make it your own?
Yeah, I'd say at University of Nebraska, I think that was the first time where I was I went to a big high school, a massive. So I went from small school, right? Very small kindergarten to 8th grade. Then I went to a big high school, Conant High School, massive, to every religion, every faith, every race, and it was amazing. I loved learning and watching and seeing all these people, and it gave me great perspective. But I stayed constant with my earlier friends, right? I was still very close. I was still in the safe zone, as I would say it, right? I was still very close. I was still in that same area. Then I went to college and I was joining a sorority, meeting new friends, trying to fit in. And I was very lucky to have been surrounded by a bunch of other women, especially at a young age. And I'm 18. I'm just like, I don't really know anybody. I went to the school. I wanted to go somewhere new and not know anyone. The older women in my sorority house were all a part of this youth group, and it was walking distance from the sorority house, and it met every Wednesday, and we get together and we talk about different challenges, and we'd go through things, and we'd sing, and would almost felt like a rock concert. Like, it was really fun. You were worshiping and it was great, and you'd meet other people who were kind of in that same stage of your life and ask certain questions and how you're going to navigate that time. And I just ended up being surrounded by a lot of wonderful people who all felt the same way that I did. And then we had our own little groups, and I can remember having different arguments or conversations about faith with Catholics and Lutherans and and all of us having this, like, I don't want to say everyone, because it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it was kumbaya, like everything was perfect, right? But there was this group of women who all understood that at the end of the day, we all loved and respected each other, and could respect the differences that existed within all of our faiths, right? And understood that at the end of the day, we all saw things in the same light, even if we disagreed on the ways to get there, right? I think that's the best way to describe it. And so college was a wonderful experience. And then moving out to Arizona and starting my own little Bible study here with a bunch of my younger sorority sisters that all ended up moving out to Arizona. And we'd get together on a Wednesday and we'd have a glass of wine and talk about work and different challenges that we were having. And a lot of relationships, a lot of times, would come up with whether it was with family or with their significant others in their life, and how that was becoming challenging, and how you could stay connected in a time where you feel like you're getting pulled away from it, right? Is kind of the best way to describe it. And so I've been, that group has been so crucial for me. And then an individual who I have to give a shout out to is Scott Savage, who has played a part for me and for Tyron Matthew. The three of us have become this little tribe, right? And we have gratitude boxes, and we talk about motivation and faith and our different upbringings. And man, the three of us could not have been any different. Like, there's so polarizing in the different backgrounds that we have, but it's really cool to hear that perspective. And, Scott's a pastor up in Northern Arizona, and he's done a good job of helping myself and Tyron navigate a space that feels very overwhelming, I would say, and very much sometimes sports and entertainment don't exactly align with faith, or morality, or whatever you want to call it. And that has its challenges, and how do you navigate that? So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Scott specifically, because he's the type of person who he's sending me something now. Like, I'm supposed to be getting a leadership book in faith and my walk now. Like, he's always challenging me. And I think everyone needs those type of people in their lives. Nice.
Well, Scott's a friend of mine, so I'm hoping the leadership book that he's getting to you, Paige, is written by myself, because I just released a leadership faith book. That would be awesome. An incredible connection. And if it's not, just call me and I'll make sure we get you a copy. But cool. Scott's been a friend, and it made me think, I wonder if that's how you and I got connected through social, because of Scott, because I've been friends with him on social media for years, like almost a decade, I bet.
I've got to envision, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking back, because I always like to try to remember how I get connected to people. Like, what's the connectivity point, right? And I always find that very interesting. And Scott and I were texting back and forth, and I told him I was going to be joining the podcast, and he's like, "Oh, I remember when you were working at Arizona Sports." And he mentioned there's some anecdote that I was like, yeah, that must have been it. Like, he came and did a show. He was on my podcast, and Tyron was on, and we like chatted back and forth. We went to a Cardinal game, and I think he had, mentioned some story about you. And I was like, oh, I gotta I follow this guy. I got to
Maybe
check it
that's what
out.
it was.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's more than likely what it was. So shout out to Scott for making good connections for people.
That's the beauty of this business though, too, right? I mean, a guy like Scott Savage, who I've still never met in person, but
I love that.
We're friends, and he would probably shoot me a text. I think we did an Instagram live right around when my book released in July, and we did a little Q&A there, which was a lot of fun. But this business is really small. Actually, this Twitter world that we sort of a lot of us live in that work in the media, it's a really small group of people that a lot of people you become really good friends with, and you've never met them, right? Like, this is the first time you and I have actually ever talked and seen each other, even though it's through Zoom, but yet we have been friends, you know, through connections on social media. And probably would have said, yeah, I'll go to bat for you. You go to bat for me. It's really 100%. A beautiful thing, isn't it?
It is a beautiful thing. And I think that's the thing that gets lost on social is people tend to harp on all the negativity, right? Yeah. And I understand that. I get that. I trust me, as a woman in sports who runs a company that is in the most male dominated aspect of professional sports, I understand the negativity. I choose not to focus on it. There's so many positive things, whether it's some of my closest friends that I have in Arizona that I know have come through. Hey, you work in sports. Hey, Lisa, you work for the Cardinals. We should hang out. Hey, Lindsay, you work for the Suns. We should hang out, right? Yeah. There is no connectivity other than, hey, we're a woman in sports and we happen to live in the same market and we see each other on Twitter and you seem normal. So let's hang out, right? Like that's where that's come. And I've met, you know, Mike Golick Jr., who's one of my best, like, closest friends in the industry. The only reason that relationship happened is because of Twitter, right? Like, there are so many different individuals that I can think about. And I go, how did you actually meet that person? And most of the time, it's Twitter. Twitter has been, it's a professional, if you look at it from, this is a space where I can connect with like-minded people who want to work in the industry that I want to work in. If you approach it that way, I think you'll have a much more enjoyable experience and not try and get into Twitter wars and try and fight with people, and you're not changing people's mind about politics on Twitter. Like, I hate to tell you, but that's your goal. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, just use it as this networking platform and this sports bar where we can all talk about sports and engage about sports and collectively have, you know, conversations, and hopefully you make very close friendships too, like many of us have. And that's, you know, just focus on that and not on the, you know, the jerk who calls you a name on Twitter every once in a while.
Quick break to tell you a little bit more about Compassion International and the Fill the Stadium initiative. There are kids around the world right now because of COVID-19 who are living in poverty, and the issue of food has gone from being hungry to starvation. The pandemic has magnified their needs, and they are truly in crisis. And so we've been called, I believe, at Sports Spectrum to work with Compassion to help bring an end to this poverty. And that's why we're partnering with Compassion, helping kids in poverty all around the world, meeting their basic needs like food, clean water, and education so they can not only survive, but reach their full potential. And last year, this past spring, most of the events that Compassion International relies on to help sponsor these children in crisis were canceled due to the pandemic. And that's left 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. 70,000 also happens to be the average size of many pro football stadiums that were once filled and now sit mostly empty. Each of the 70,000 empty seats represents a child in crisis who needs your help, who needs our help to step up and fill the stadium. Now think about this. The cost of a couple tickets to a game, food and drinks that many cannot attend, that's what it's going to take to help a kid out for an entire year. So you can go to the website, fillthestadium.com right now, fillthestadium.com, and team up with Compassion to help these kids in crisis. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. So check out the website again, fillthestadium.com, donate, pray, and thank you so much for helping us out with Compassion International. Fillthestadium.com. Paige Dimakos is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, CEO of the Draft Network. I say that because I thought Chief Operating Officer was the title, but we broke some news if you're just somehow joining us in the middle of a podcast. And Paige is now the CEO of the Draft Network. And that is a big deal. You mentioned it, being a female in this business, especially in a male-dominated business, but a male-dominated sport like football. What has that been like for you? I think I want to hear your story on just trying to cut through and break through as a female, because I think it's awesome that you're doing this, but there has to have been some bumps in the road along the way.
Oh, there've been plenty of bumps, plenty of bruises, plenty of risks, plenty of falls, plenty of that, crying in a car by yourself, calling dad, like just plenty of those moments. And I think it's important to share because social media specifically is so much of the highlights, right? And people they tend to shy away from whether it's, a tough moment or a bad moment or whatever that looks like. Trust me, I have way more good days than I have bad days. Even in the year 2020, way more good days than I have bad days, right? And in my professional career, I've had significantly more good days than I have had bad days. And my focus throughout that whole time was always, if I let insert this issue derail me, I'm never going to get to the end goal, right? I'm never going to get there. And so I think for me, the moments and the biggest challenges that I had were early on when I wasn't as confident in myself. I was 18, 19, 20 years old, covering college football, trying to break in what is like the oldest school area of the country, like Midwest, Nebraska football. They don't have professional sports. So the Huskers are everything, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I walk in, I'm 5'11", I'm dark because I'm tan from coming back from Greece, blonde hair. I'm just like, could not stick out anymore, right? And I'm just like, put a ball cap on, try and blend in, right? And I'm just like, go. And then I decided, and I can't remember what exactly it was, but I think it was a conversation with my dad that I had where he was just like, you belong in the room. Like, there's no reason why you should feel like you don't belong there. You are just as talented. You are just as smart. And you know football better than any man that I know. And that's coming from a dude who played professional sports. And he was like, you deserve to be there. Like, you deserve to be in that room. And that, I think having people like that is so important. And then, Bo Pelini, who was the head coach, who I always tell people was very misunderstood. He was an advocate for me, an ally. He taught me so much. He engaged with me. He was just an excellent human being as far as like, he never treated me differently. And that was so pivotal for me to have the head coach of the football team that I was covering at that time, at the 18 to 22 year old range, believe me. Right. And I asked him a question, and I can remember so distinctly sitting in the front row, asking this very, very detailed question about the type of defense they were in. And he just kind of like, his whole head just whipped around because it was not a man's voice. And he was like, and kind of did a double take and then was like, all right. And just answered me. And that was like, it was like, right. Like just this big collective moment of like, okay, now I can go. And you just got to ignore people along the way. Have there been inappropriate things that have happened? Yes. Have I been called things? Have I been sent things? Have I been? Yes. And it should never happen. And I wish it didn't. And I wish it didn't happen. But I choose to focus on all the positive people, all the advocates and allies and athletes that I've had wonderful relationships with, instead of what I would say 5% that hasn't been good. Right. Yeah. And I wish it was 0%. But what I can say is I know that Michelle Tafoya and, all these women that are a generation ahead of me, they dealt with 10, 15, 20%, right? And now I'm 31 and I hope that by the 21-year-old, it's 2.5%. And then by the time it's the 11-year-old, it's 0. Right. Yeah. And I think that's, if you look at that and you see the strides and you hope for everything to continue down that path, we are, even just since I started my career, we are light years from where we were when I first started. And that's such a good thing. And it feels good to be trending in that direction for sure.
Well, you mentioned the bumps and the bruises along the way too, that we all have to go through. We all could tell that story. And it's weird. I was listening to a podcast recently with a guy named Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tim or know his podcast. Really great. He's an interesting guy because his questions are so just insightful and they really make you think in terms of the answer. So I'm stealing a question from him because I just think it's a fun answer here, or not maybe a fun answer, but it'll be an interesting answer for you. But the question was, what's your favorite failure that you've gone through that has helped shape and mold you who you are? So I told, a couple of people, I said, I'm going to probably steal this question for many more interviews because I just think it allows us to have a really interesting conversation off of the answer. So what's a favorite failure of yours that you've gone through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think very specifically for me, I was working for the ESPN affiliate in Arizona. I was working for Arizona Sports, and I had reached what I would call the very, very, very end of the road of I have done every last thing that I can do, but I don't want to leave Arizona. I want to stay here, and I need something more challenging. I'm a person that needs to be challenged. And I left the company. I went to another company called FanRag Sports. And FanRag was not, the decision to leave in and of itself was not a failure. But because of the timing and the risk that I took and how quickly things went from it not being good to being bad, most people, if you ask my family, right, they would all say that was a bad decision. It was a horrible decision. Why did you do that? You left this ESPN job, you left and you went to go work for a company that was smaller and riskier and whatever. And while, yes, was it risky? Yes. Did it pan out the way I wanted it to? Absolutely not. Was it one of the better, more crucial learning experiences that I have ever had in my professional career? Absolutely. There is no chance that if I did not have that 9 months of time with FanRag, that I would be where I am now. Whether it was the connections or the things that I was able to do, the events I was able to cover, all the different business things that I learned behind the scenes as it went through. I was involved in the asset sale and I got to see all the different components of the business. And quite frankly, all the decisions that were made that were bad decisions, right? What led to the business not being profitable, what led to certain things happening, that put me in a position now where I can make much smarter, better business decisions. And there's no chance I ever would have gotten that experience at that high level had I just stayed in my comfortable, cushy job. Right. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with staying in the comfortable job. If that's for you, that's okay. I choose not to live in the comfort zone. I like being challenged. I need that. It's part of who I am as an individual. And that was a decision that many in my life would tell me, including my parents, like, oh, it wasn't the smartest decision. I'm like, well, I understand it didn't work out how you think it did. But in my mind, it was such a crucial failure for me to learn from and then make better decisions as I move forward.
Well, to quote the great Yoda from Star Wars, the greatest teacher failure is, he talks backwards, of course, but isn't that the truth? I think when I heard him say that in one of the movies, I said, whoever wrote that line is speaking my language, because we can learn all we can learn from just having everything handed to us and all the good things in life. But it's really the failures that mold us and shape us and teach us, right?
Absolutely. And you said, if everything is easy for you, it's very hard for people to have success. It just is. I think the people that I know, and people always ask me about this, like, your childhood was so tumultuous, your mom left you, like, just all these things that happen that are like, and I'm like, yes, I understand that, but there is no way that I am the individual that I am now, where people are like, wow, you're young, you're doing this CEO thing, you're doing this, you're doing that. There's no way that those things all play out if my life was perfect. Right? There's no chance. If I never had to face adversity, if I never had to face failures, if I wasn't forced to figure things out, I would never have led me to where I am now. And that's because you can't replicate doing things. You can't replicate failing and figuring it out. Like, it's impossible to do that. And there's nothing wrong with, like, and I get this from parents who, allow for their kids. And I have some friends, like, most of their life was pretty sheltered. Most of their life was pretty, they didn't have to face as much adversity, but it's tougher for them to face challenge now. Like, it's almost, it puts you, it's almost like backwards. Like, it's like you want your kids to face some adversity because they need to be able to figure things out. And if you make everything easy for them, then they get older and it's like, oh, what happens if you don't get the job? What happens if you get fired? What happens if you don't make the team, right? Like, those are all things, like, you got to be able to figure stuff out for yourself. And I know it's hard to watch people fail, but it's important for people to learn and get better and stronger and smarter and make better decisions later on.
As we wind down here with Paige Dimakos from the Draft Network, again, the website is thedraftnetwork.com. I want to just ask you a couple more favorites questions. So we had the favorite failure. What's been the favorite sporting event that you've covered in your journey here in the last few years?
Wow, that's a tough question for me because I have so many great memories. So I will give you one that I was there for media purposes and one that I was there for fun, right?
Okay.
So if you can recall 2015, 2016, a absolutely epic playoff game in Arizona between the Green Bay Packers and the Arizona Cardinals.
I remember it.
It was unbelievable. Aaron Rodgers threw a last-minute Hail Mary to score the game-tying touchdown, and then Larry Fitzgerald had I'm getting chills talking about it. Like, Larry had this absolutely unbelievable Larry moment where he just willed himself down the field. Like, it just was completely, you saw him get the ball, and you were like, it doesn't matter that he's 32 years old and the DB covering him is probably a second faster than he is. He pushed that DB and he went 75 yards down and they scored a touchdown. And I was right there. And Larry went up to Adrian Wilson, who used to play for the Cardinals. And Larry is traditionally like, he does not celebrate at all. He's the guy who takes the ball, gives it to the ref, doesn't.
Yes.
This was the only time I can remember him just having this emotional, epic moment because holy cow, it was awesome. Like, he just, every bit of the air in that stadium, at State Farm Stadium, was sucked out on that Aaron Rodgers last minute Hail Mary touchdown. And for the Cardinals to then get the ball and drive the field and score that touchdown felt miraculous. It felt miraculous. It felt like there was no chance that was going to happen. And of course it was Larry Fitzgerald. So that for me as a professional, to watch that in the home stadium and look around and see, wow, this fan, like, it was so loud. It was unbelievable. It was so much fun. It was just beautiful chaos is the way that I could describe it. And then most recently, the last sporting event, other than the Super Bowl that I can recall being at and being so interested from Draft Network perspective, is Alabama, LSU, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa in Tuscaloosa, in a place where Alabama does not lose. And man, they do it differently in the South. It is a different level of football. And it pains me to say that because I always made fun of them for it, but it's just different. And Joe Burrow and Ed Orgeron went into Tuscaloosa, to a place where nobody beats them, and beat them up. They bullied them. And it was unbelievable to watch, and then be right catty corner from the LSU section where they were all celebrating and going nuts. And the second that the game ended, for anybody who's been to a sporting event, I know it's hard to take yourself back to a place where you were going to sporting events, but at the end of the game, all the lights stay on, the scores stay up. It, lasts for usually about a half hour, 45 minutes. I swear to God, the second that the game ended, everything went off. It was like Alabama did not want one single photo with the score showing that they lost the football game to LSU inside their stadium.
Wow.
It was so funny. I was like, wow, they really are not good losers, huh? And they don't know how to lose. And it was such a funny moment of looking up and going, okay, so it's dark. Like, we're leaving the stadium dark. Like, this is great. Like, they just turned everything off. They were like, no, we refuse. We don't want anybody to remember this moment of LSU beating us. And it was
hilarious.
It was so funny, man. I was like, I will never forget this. So that's obviously very stuck in my memory from sporting events.
I love that. What's your favorite childhood sports memory that you think back to?
Ooh, good question again too. Probably going to, it's hard to romanticize anything more than you can Wrigley Field. If you're a baseball fan, really, if you're a sports fan, Fenway Park, Old Yankee, and Wrigley Field are pretty much the most romantical experiences you can have as a sports fan. And going to Wrigley and taking the train and sitting out in the bleachers and being a bleacher bum as a kid with a ball cap on and a baseball glove and going early and my dad would always take us and let us watch, we'd go to the second they let the gates open, we would go in. Right. And I knew he was probably bored out of his mind, but my brother and I were like, we catch a foul ball because they're taking batting practice and we're there and we're like, this is the best. And they have Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor and we're just such an epic roster. And we loved watching it. Sammy Sosa would run out and do his little kiss thing and we'd all lose our minds out in the field. And so I think for me, just like every moment being at Wrigley felt special. And like now just knowing that like this was the first year that I didn't go to a game at Wrigley since probably since I was four or five, right? Like it's incredible all the things that I took for granted, like little experiences that I was like, oh yeah, it's just going to Wrigley. Like now it's like I imagine myself going to Wrigley and just dropping to the ground and being like, never leave me again. Like don't ever let me not come here, because it's such a wonderful, beautiful experience of people that are all excited about being in the same place and sharing this moment. And I think every sporting event I go to after this will be sacred to me. Like everyone is going to feel special. And I hope I never let that go, because if 2020 taught me anything, it's to be just be thankful for the little stuff that you took for granted and the little moments and the things you thought you'd always have, because, you won't always have them. And so going to Wrigley is always special. And I am hopeful to go back soon.
Yeah, I got my chance in 2014, I think it was. My friend got married out in Chicago, and I said, all right, I'm going to Chicago. We're going to Wrigley. And we got tickets, and we sat there, and it was, like you say, it was so romantic and such a wonderful sports experience that I didn't really care that the Cubs weren't that good that year. I just wanted to go to Wrigley and experience that as a sports fan. And so I'm glad that I did. And especially with no sports in 2020, being able to attend in person, that was so difficult and so hard. Paige, you kind of maybe answered this question as we wind down. This is the last question. We asked this to all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. But what is the lesson that God is teaching you right now, that he's showing you in your life and on the journey that you've been? Certainly being thankful for those small things and those small moments as sports fans, but from just a life perspective, what's the great lesson the Lord is showing you right now?
Yeah, it's got to be gratitude. It has been so present on my mind constantly for what feels like, and it was Scott that posted something about how we do this great job in November about, gratefulness in November, and then we make this switch and it's like greed. I want presents. I want this, I want that. And it really just I was like, wow, that is accurate. We can't even get through the day of Thanksgiving before it's Black Friday sales, right? Yes. Like it's instantaneous. We can't even finish family dinner before we're already thinking about things that we need, right? And I think this year has taught me, whether it's family, my boyfriend, my friends, my coworkers, I feel grateful for them as individuals more than I ever have. I feel grateful for, like, it's just little things in general. And I've always been a person that's practiced gratitude. And I feel like I've always done a good job of that. But it's hard to be thankful for all the small things all the time, because they become just things that you get used to. And this year taught me, like, these are not things that I can get used to. Right. And they can be taken away, and not having, Thanksgiving with my family, right? Like that in and of itself is like, wow, every Sunday night dinner that I might be like, oh, really? Like, I'm not feeling it. I want to, and now it's like, no, I have to go. Like I have to cherish all the moments, cherish all the memories, cherish all the people, and not the things. Because this year has taught, I could have an Amazon package delivered every day and it would be completely meaningless to me, because there's no fulfillment. The fulfillment comes from the people and the moments and the experiences. And I've always been a person that's been aware of that. But this year has made, it is very much God is saying, be grateful for everything you have. You have so much, right? And I do. I have so much, and I have more than I need. That's just, I have way more than I need. And most people do, right? Most people have more than they need. And it was just kind of like a reminder, especially thinking about the change from November to December and going, yeah, that isn't great that we do that. And it's a societal thing, and trying to break out of it and be the fish that goes this way with all the fish that are going the other way. Right. And just try and swim against it, and not be thinking I need all these things that I don't need, just sitting back and going, it's great. I have an awesome meal with my family who I love, and being grateful for that moment instead of thinking about whatever else that I don't actually need.
Yeah, that's really well said. She is Paige Dimakos, the CEO of the Draft Network. Again, draftnetwork.com. Thedraftnetwork.com is the website. Make sure you go check that out. Paige, this was great. Great to get to know you and have you on the show, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And many thanks to Paige Dimakos for joining us here today on the show. You can check her out on Instagram and Twitter at _sportspage, PAIGE. And then check out thedraftnetwork.com where she works and is the CEO. She also hosts that TDN Fantasy podcast. You can check out all the great content there. It's NFL time with the playoffs, and then the draft comes right after that. Thedraftnetwork.com is a great place to check out. And Paige Dimakos is a great person, and we're glad that she joined us here today on the show. Many thanks to Paige. We also thank our sponsors and partners, Compassion International. Check them out at fillthestadium.com right now to join with Compassion and pro athletes and team up with a great initiative that they have going on right now, raising critical resources for 70,000 children and their families impacted by COVID. Every empty seat of 70,000 represents one child who needs support for the critical next 12 months. It's a stadium that cannot remain empty. Check out fillthestadium.com. You can direct you to our website as well, sportspectrum.com, to stay in touch with all that we have here going on at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We have a magazine, we have a website, we have devotionals, we have podcasts, we have a YouTube channel with tons of video content, great content that intersects the world of sports with faith in Jesus Christ. That's what we're about, bringing Jesus back into the conversation. Lastly, whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, do us a favor, click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. All 600 plus episodes of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Again, my name is Jason Romano. If you want to reach me, you can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.